You know it's fall when the new iPhone sprouts from Apple.
This week, does Apple have a hit or a clunker?
Then, Facebook wants a do-over on news. Could it work?
In vaping, the newest trend turns deadly. I'm Alexis Cordato.
And I am Steven Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward.
Let's launch.
Hey, by the way, you sound closer.
Oh, I am closer. I'm across the river now,
I,
Steve.
I
Not across the ocean.
Actually, the truth is, you sound exactly the same, which is fascinating in and of itself. Welcome to episode 93 of Future Forward.
Ooh, 100
93.
coming up.
Yeah, and big birthday. And by the way, we're going to do a 3-chapter show. Chapter 1 is going to be the iPhone. Chapter 2 is going to be Facebook's news tab. And chapter 3 is going to be vaping. And we'll be joined for chapter 3 by our friend Glenn from IEEE Spectrum to talk about vaping and tech and whether or not it's tech at all. But I want to start with the iPhone. I'm just gonna put it to you as pointedly as I can. Are you gonna buy one?
I never buy the new iPhones, ever. Because I
Ever?
don't trust Apple.
You don't trust Apple. What does that
Well,
mean?
like they've had too many misses, like the new MacBook Pros with the keyboards and the touch bar miss, facial recognition technology, and the iPhone X, not really my thing. So I don't know. What about you?
So I am a recovering fanboy, um, and I did not buy last year's phone. So my phone is 2 years old, and I don't. It doesn't feel old. I don't
What do
feel
you have right now?
the X.
You have the
Yeah,
X.
yeah.
Okay. So
Um,
I was eligible for an upgrade and I didn't. I actually just have a brand new iPhone 8 Plus.
so I'm gonna admit that I think based on everything I've read that I am going to buy the new iPhone when it comes out on Tuesday.
So the only reason why I might switch, jump the X and get the new one is because of I like taking photos on my phone. And based off of the specs that I've seen, I think the new features are exciting.
So I've always had my phone for email and web, and I've always had a Sony A7 Mark II with a great big gorgeous lens. But lately, I found I'm not carrying it around so much. It's heavy. I have to put it in a bag, and I think the 3 lens iPhone is going to be the Rubicon where my iPhone becomes my camera.
Yeah. I mean, that's happened to me. I used to carry around big, bulky SLRs. I was like a Nikon fangirl for a long time with all the crazy lenses. And then I switched to a mirrorless camera, which was so much lighter and portable. But I could show you photos, like just even from this last summer that were shot on my iPhone. And it's just, it's really tough to justify carrying the weight.
Yeah.
And so I do think that the 3 lens iPhone is, uh, is exciting for
Now,
prosumers.
now one finger point in the chest of Apple in a second, but first, buried in all of the various articles about what it's going to have and all this, there's this very odd comment which I don't even know what to make of. It says it's going to beef up video dramatically, and it's going to allow editing as video is being recorded. What the hell does
Wait,
that
wait.
mean? What does that
Say that
mean?
again. It's going to allow video as it's being recorded.
Video editing as it's being recorded.
Does that mean like you can add filters and stuff to it?
I don't have the slightest idea. As a video editor, I'm literally like reading that, going, "Is that a typo? Like what video edit?" Anyway, we'll find out.
I
But
wonder if that is catering to sort of this new generation of makers, like the TikTok crowd, where it's really meant for micro video editing.
yeah, but the other thing that's changed is photographs. As I mean, I think back to the way I took pictures even 2 or 3 years ago. It used to be I would take them and then I would edit them and then I would color correct them and then I would make a collection of the best of it and then I would publish them. And now it's like much more like if I take pictures on Friday night and I wait till Saturday morning to publish them, that's just absurd, right?
Yeah.
They need to be of the moment.
Hmm.
And so all right, so I'm gonna buy the no. All right. So here's my finger. Here's my. So I was at the Apple store the other day, and I was talking to one of the Apple genius people or whatever they are, the salespeople out on the floor. We're talking about the iPhone, the Apple Air versus the MacBook versus the MacBook Pro versus the Air MacBook. And I said to the Apple rep, so that's kind of a ridiculous naming strategy, right? And she kind of looked around to make sure no one was listening, and she's like, makes no sense to anybody. She's
Yeah.
like, the Air was a totally different product line, and now they're calling the iPad Air, like, which is,
Yeah.
and I was like, good. So it's not just me. They seem to just be off the rails. And in terms of the new phone launch, I mean, I don't even know which. I guess there's one called Pro.
I don't know. I mean, adding pro to anything just feels so dated. Like
Ooh, harsh.
it speaks to a time when you were trying to capture the market of consumers who understood that technology and business or technology for you as a professional would be additive in your life. And that's just not something that needs to be stated anymore.
All right. So Bloomberg says there's going to be three new models by the time Pro upgrades to the iPhone XS, the iPhone XS Max, and a replacement for the XR.
XX Max is just dumb. That sounds the worst
It
out of
sounds.
all of
um,
them. XX Max.
yeah. Is it just they're not paying attention? I mean,
I think they've kind of just lost their way in the sense that I don't even know internally if they know why they do what they do. In the sense that, like, yes, this is the first time that they're live streaming this event on YouTube. Okay, so that's different. But this playbook is tired. Like they are so locked and loaded into this September, October cycle. And I just think that they don't even know how to switch it up anymore. And when they do, they kind of like trip over themselves.
well, so the rumor mill, the Apple fanboy and girl rumor mill says that the big changes in the iPhone are coming in 2020.
I don't know. Like, what could that mean?
All right. So have you ever done? I should know this, and I don't. But you've never done hardware, have you?
No.
So me neither. But I presume that you've got this massively long spreadsheet that starts with design, testing, prototype, testing, then it goes to all the parts have to be forged and tested. Then you have to do deals with whoever your vendors are to get them to build the damn thing. Then they have to up, get all the parts to come in from all their vendors so that you get all the various bits and pieces. Then it has to get built. Then it has to be tested again, and then it has to be deployed. And it needs to land in the store on September 10th or whenever
Hmm.
and any one of those places, you know, Japan has a meltdown in Fukushima. Any one of those places along the supply chain where there's a hiccup potentially screws your delivery.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible that there's a 2020 phone that's already been designed and is now in the process of moving through this 24 step. By the way, I made that up. For those of you
Yeah,
who are
I'm just trying to
listening,
think. I mean, unless it's another moment like, who knew you wanted an iPad? Right, that was the brilliance of Steve Jobs. I just don't really know what more I want from my phone. Like the things that I want from my phone have nothing to do with the hardware and software. It's things like I want less robocalls. I want less spam in my
all
inbox.
right. So I can answer that question because I know what I want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Infinite battery life.
I want battery. So there's supposedly on the phone that's coming out this week, you'll be able to take your AirPods and set them on the phone, and they'll charge from the phone battery to the AirPods.
Hmm. Okay, that's cool.
You can
Oh,
take
and I
your
actually do like the split one. You can actually take two sets of AirPods and sync them to the same phone.
Yep,
That's cool.
I like that too. Pam and I would do that. We would do that. I also like the idea that you can take your Apple Watch, which by the way I've never owned nor even put on my wrist, and put that on your
Same.
phone and it charges. I like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think what I really want in the next generation is much better AR, much
Oh.
better. I want it to maps to be better. I want it to say, "Oh, you're going to this restaurant. Just chill. We'll tell you when to get off the subway and what's the best, like go left or right." I want much better mapping, navigational help.
Hmm. Okay.
And I
That kind of
want
goes back to a few episodes ago where
and I
they
want
said we were talking
discovery. I
about
want
Apple Maps.
much better discovery, like on where things are and what's going on in my neighborhood. I mean, we like going out to listen to jazz on the weekends.
Hmm.
It is so mind-numbingly hard to find music in the city of New York in your neighborhood.
Yeah. It's true. Well, I don't know if it exists anymore. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
I'm so curious that you want more discovery and recommendations from your devices because that's maybe a different show, but it's like there's an element of that that implies that we have to surrender more data in order for these things to make better recommendations. And two, that we still live in a world where we trust these algorithms to basically make the right choices for us.
Well, I recommend it. Well, all right. So let's pause on that because that actually turns out to be a fabulous transition to Facebook and its news do over. So
Mm-hmm.
I, I don't generally claim credit for things, and in fact, I don't really think I deserve credit for this. But as I was reading about what Facebook's doing, I had this very weird, like, aha moment. And then I was like, wait a minute, this sounds so familiar to me. And I went back into my archives and I found an article that I wrote in 2016,
Ancient Steve,
ancient,
2016. Yeah.
on Forbes, which I no longer write for, but back then I was. And the headline was Facebook owns your web experience, and it showed growth trends and a bunch of other things. And then if you scroll down to about the middle of the article, I literally took the Facebook homepage, put it in Photoshop, redesigned it the way I wanted it to work, and there it is, number two, a news tab.
There you go.
Now, am I going to send them a bill for my genius? No, of course not. It wasn't. It was part of why I think I wrote it the way I did was because in some ways I thought it was so obvious. Like when I want to read news, give me a tool that allows me to read news.
Yep. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah.
Now,
And the notion of Facebook wanting to own the entire web experience makes a lot of sense.
having said that, I'm puzzled. I mean, I've read everything I could about what Facebook's doing in news, and I'm a little puzzled by they're doing deals. I mean, did you understand it? Does it make sense to you what they're paying and who they're paying?
So I thought it was similar to what Google does in the sense that as part of Google's news algorithm, there is a human component to it. And I think Facebook is trying to replicate that. No?
I can't. So they're hiring journalists,
Yeah.
but they're not writing headlines and they're not changing anything. So really, they're hiring journalists, but the role they're really putting them in is curator.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they're only doing 40 deals, at least that, I mean, again, it's all somewhat conjecture at this point, but that seems to be what the Verge is saying is that they're doing 40 deals or something like 40 deals, and they're paying quote millions of dollars. Um, okay,
Which is nothing for them.
which is a
Yeah.
rounding error, nothing for them. Like absurd that that's even a big deal.
I mean,
Um,
but this is just parlaying into just the larger trend of robots or algorithms doing a bulk of the work and then humans basically doing like a QA slash curation layer on top of that. Google has it, Facebook's doing it. I think we talked a few episodes ago about Apple News and how Apple News isn't just surveying the content anymore, right? They're starting to do profiles
yeah,
of political profiles.
I guess what I'm so there was an NBC News link to the buyer report, and he says here I'll just read it because it frames the conversation. The context: Facebook is offering about 40 or so publishers around $2 to $2.5 million a year for the rights to put their content in the news tab. A news section of the site will only feature reputable content and be curated in part by editors.
Hmm.
So 40, so we know what the 40 sources are. You and I could do it off the top of our head. It's ABC, NBC, CBS, Associated Press, Reuters, probably Fox News, the New York Times, the Washington Post. But like in the case of the Washington Post, will it link to a page that requires a login for a
Again.
subscription?
Yeah.
Um, and so going further down
Maybe
this
that's
end.
where the money part comes in. Like that would actually be really interesting if what Facebook was doing was almost buying like access tokens for people who want to access articles via the platform. So like if you don't subscribe to the New York Times and you get 10 free articles a month, maybe you'll get, an extra 5 or 10 if you happen to click on them through Facebook.
So what I liked about the way this NBC News article defined it is it said if you're a small or mid-sized publisher, um, it's effectively free money because Facebook isn't asking you to spend any money to create new content. It's just giving you money in order for you to link back to what you already produce. It's 100% profit. But it's
Hmm.
still, I mean, I ran a couple of small web content companies. I'm sorry, $2 million just doesn't move the needle for any of these guys.
Yeah.
Um, and and
But it's an interesting enough carrot, don't you think? $2 million.
all right, let me ask the question a different. Let me no, I don't. But let me ask the question a different way. So among your journalist friends and my journalist friends, if somebody said to them, "Hey, we want you to come and be one of the journalists running the Facebook News tab," would they take the job?
Oh man, I don't I don't know. I mean, there a big part of me says yes, because being a journalist today and job security, it's like you're kind of always on the move, right? And so taking a big corporate job at Facebook is potentially really exciting. But then there's another part of me that says no, because there's they're rotten to the core in the sense that affecting change internally is going to be an uphill battle that a journalist is potentially really going to want to kind of get into.
I just think I imagine the news standards handbook that you're going to be handed as a curator of the news tab is going to be 150 pages long, and it's going to say, you know, if we're concerned about political bias, we're concerned about inappropriate words, we're concerned about inappropriate pictures, we're concerned about privacy, we're like every one of those things just strikes me as a endless series of landmines that you're inevitably going to step on, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I
it's
mean,
kind of like if you look at the New York Times article about the CEO of YouTube, like she is a person who is making all of these calls and is like a war room, right? Every day something comes up and she reacts to it,
yep.
but she's the CEO. How can any individual contributor who is not sort of in a C-suite type role going to be empowered to actually affect policy?
And it'd be fascinating to know what these we're never going to learn, but it would be fascinating to know, like, does the news curator of the news tab get to say, hey, we want to cover the MIT Epstein meltdown. Are we going to link to the New Yorker? Are we going to link to the Verge reporting on the New Yorker? Are we going to link to both? Are we going to, I mean, like, is it always original sources first? Probably, right?
Hmm.
What if you're linking to something that is a subscription? How does that work?
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think it's not really. All right. At the risk of being negative, which I don't mean to be, I think it's less journalism and more content management with a human sizzle.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think what I would love to just see more of is for all of these organizations and platforms to disclose basically what the inputs are, just so that we understand, in the sense that we, robots and algorithms, flawed, human judgment, human error, like inevitable. So, you can look at it and say it's a lose-lose, no system is perfect. So then just acknowledge the imperfections at the onset, right? Disclose this is what our policies are. Give consumers basically insight into why they see what they see. In the absence of not doing that, it's super hard to trust any large tech organization and any large content platform.
So, listening to what you just said, I had this kind of aha moment, which is, did Facebook just totally screw itself in terms of safe harbor?
Huh.
They're hiring journalists to
Yeah.
curate news, which means they're taking responsibility for what they put on the homepage in what order. I mean, doesn't that essentially take the take them out from behind the curtain and mean they're now an editorial operation and no longer can they say, "Hey, we're just a platform"? I think that might be a problem. Like, or at least
Maybe. We should have like a legal expert talk about that.
we most certainly should. And with that, by the way, we are next going to go to something uh, from our friends at IEEE. So we're gonna bring in our friend Glenn Zorpet to talk about e-cigs and vaping, and where it very quickly has devolved to. So, Glenn, welcome. All right, so Glenn joins us now. I have to say, when I saw this headline on the IEEE Spectrum website, my first reaction was like, is that an IEEE story? And then I read it and I thought about it, and I guess I decided it was because it's a health story and it's a tech story. Tell me, just like from an editorial standpoint, where does it fit in the scope of the things you cover?
Well, we have a history with this topic because we embraced the subject of e-cigarettes early. We've had an article, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, by one of our friends and regular contributors, Michael Peck, down in Maryland, when he became aware that there was a flaw with some cheaply made e-cigarettes that was causing their batteries to explode. So an e-cigarette is an electronic cigarette. I mean, basically, it's a device that has a cartridge with a fluid in it, and it has a battery, and the battery powers a heater. So you press a button, the heater heats a fluid, which vaporizes it, and you inhale it. So that's hence the term e-cigarette.
Right.
It's got this battery and this heater. So it's essentially an electronic device. It's engineered. And we became aware, as I say, some years ago, that cheap e-cigarettes, many of them coming from China, were using shoddy batteries. And in some cases, these batteries were exploding and injuring people badly. We're not talking about thousands of cases, but there was a substantial number of cases in which people were badly injured. So we got interested. We did a feature. I believe it was, we broke news on this. And so we've been kind of covering them ever since.
So the thing I find interesting about them is that, like, they almost look like a novelty, right? Like, they're for sale all over the place, and for all of the years we've gone through kind of removing tobacco from society, somehow e-cigarettes have slid between technology, and they're kind of medical devices, but they're kind of really not. They're, and particularly on the marketing side, I mean, the fact that they've been marketed with kind of candy flavors and kid-friendly logos, all of a sudden it's like in the last, I'd say, 2 weeks, and this is the IEEE article that kind of brought it to my attention. It seems like the combination of respiratory disease and some changes in states restricting marketing has made everyone go, wait a minute, maybe these things are actually genuinely dangerous.
Well, I think early on, people kind of gave e-cigarettes a bit of a pass because they seem like the lesser of two evils. And I think there's still a lot of, I mean, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's still a lot of evidence that for the many, many millions of people who smoke in the United States alone, e-cigarettes do seem to be a healthier option for these people who really have this, let's call it what it is, an addiction to nicotine. And the reason seems to be that with an e-cigarette, you can determine and control what you put in that cartridge that I mentioned earlier, that little cartridge with the fluid in it. You can just put nicotine in that, which is what most smokers want. That's what they crave. Cigarettes have hundreds, maybe thousands, a conventional cigarette, a tobacco cigarette, if you're smoking it, they have hundreds, maybe thousands of other things in that smoke that could be problematic and unhealthy for your lungs. Whereas, as I say, an e-cigarette, you can control what you put in that. So the main components in that fluid are typically nicotine and a flavoring.
And I think it's important to talk about in this particular article, the whole issue of respiratory disease isn't a nicotine issue, or is it?
Well, in this case this case that they're tracking now, and at the last count, there were more than 450 reported cases that the CDC in the United States, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, were tracking and monitoring. The people had symptoms very similar to pneumonia. In fact, so it's a form of acute respiratory disease. And as I say, the symptoms are very similar to pneumonia. Pneumonia can basically be either viral or bacterial. But the reason why they knew this is something different and new is that when these people had the symptoms of either bacterial or viral pneumonia, but when they tested, they found no evidence of either one. So that's when they realized, and furthermore, what all these people had in common was that they had vaped within a certain period of time before they presented with these symptoms at hospitals. So, and not only that, but the vast majority of them had vaped THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. So that to them said, hey, this is something new. It seems to be linked to vaping through e-cigarettes, and particularly vaping THC. And I should mention one other thing, which is that there was some suspicion that vitamin E acetate, also known as vitamin E oil, was also present in a surprisingly large number, they believe, of the cases where people came down with this condition. Now, vitamin E acetate is not a standard thing with these THC or other vaping fluids, but, and they don't know. The FDC came out and said, listen, this is all preliminary. We don't know that it's this vitamin E oil at all, but we have been seeing it, and it's something we're going to be investigating.
So one of the differences, I think, and again, I have to confess, I've never vaped, so I'm speaking without knowledge here. But if you go into the corner deli and buy some fluid and put it in your e-cigarette, you're dealing with both an e-cigarette device that may or may not come from a reputable source and may have a battery issue, and you're also dealing with a fluid that doesn't have a well-known brand associated with it. So you've got two variables there that both seem like they could be pretty dangerous.
Right. Well, that's part of the complexity here, and part of the problem that's going to be involved in trying to sort this out is because there are, I didn't forget the number, but roughly a dozen states in the United States where vaping THC is completely legal. And you go to a state store, it's highly regulated. The products are subjected to tests and physiological studies. And then there are a whole bunch of states where vaping THC is not legal, but widely practiced. So there's really not much way you can study and know what's in these canisters unless you go out and buy them on the black market, on the illegal market.
So is the solution some kind of an FDA approved stamp for product that comes through a rigorous test? I mean, the FDA is wading into it, but they still don't seem to really understand, what their role is yet.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question, but I think what's going to happen now is an enormous amount of effort and resources and money is going to go into studying this very issue. They don't have terrific statistics right now on this. Like those facts I gave you before, that there's a large number of people who presented this disorder, this disease, were vaping THC, and they kind of think that vitamin E oil may have something to do with it,
yeah.
But they don't have great numbers. And I think those numbers are going to start rolling in the next 6 to 12 months. There's going to be a great deal of study. And I think that they're going to be taking a look at the people who are vaping THC legally in the, as I say, the 10 or so or whatever number of states where it's legal, and you can see what these people are vaping and you can test it. And then there's probably going to be some studies of other vaping fluids and ones that are black market from those studies, we'll start to get a good picture of this.
Well, it's clear that this isn't going away, and that the numbers themselves are fairly staggering and urgent. So appreciate the coverage and appreciate you taking the time to share with us.
Happy to do it.
All right, so Alexa, I have to ask. Like, I don't mean to sound romantic, but like, cigarette smoking before we found out that it killed you, at least looked great on film and television. It had those wafts of smoke, and it was all like very cinema noir. Like, is there ever a time when you see someone vaping and go, "Oh, how cool is that?" Or does it just always look goofy and terrible?
It looks goofy and terrible, and this is also what freaked me out this summer. I saw Europeans doing it, and not that I think cigarette smoking looks good, but I just always assumed like Europeans would never give up smoking cigarettes. And now that I see them vaping, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on?
Well, yeah. All right. So we are out of time. It was a good show. Next week, I mean, I don't know if I'll have my new iPhone. I don't know when it's going to be available. But if I do, I will bring it and wave it around. And have a good week and future forward.
See you next week, Steve.